Hey, what's up, guys? So, I'm going to keep in mind my voice because people do listen to videos on YouTube with headphones. No matter how mad I get, I won't scream. So, I really feel after all the research I've been doing about the Switch 2, just the way that Doug Bowser, the things that he says, I think the Switch 2 is aimed towards people that have never bought a Switch. And let me explain why. Doug Bowser said, if we can't afford the Switch 2, there's always the Switch 1. Doug Bowser, you literally said that to loyal customers that have had the Switch for 8 years. They had the Switch day one, they had the Switch version 2, they had the Switch Lite, they had the Switch OLED. I think they know that they could play the Switch 1 that they purchased. So that tells me you're talking to new customers that never bought a Switch. And I'll tell you why else I think that the Switch 2 is aimed to new customers. I feel, not me, because I'm not buying the Switch 2, but I feel a lot of loyal customers that bought the Switch are being punished. Hear me out. Isn't it interesting? As usual, as game companies usually do, they dictate everything. Well, think about this. They're choosing which Switch 1 games are free updates and what games are upgrades for fidelity and performance, right? Charging you $10 or $20 each game. Why is Zelda free on the online membership? So that tells me you're going to choose certain games that we aren't going to have to pay for the upgrade of the fidelity and performance. And here's another thing. When, I'm not saying you, but if something happens paying $80 a game and you can't afford the online membership, you have to rebuy, right? The fidelity and performance upgrades for the Zelda games. Think about that. So now, potentially, because of the compatibility issues of the Switch 1 games on the Switch 2, you're going to have to rely on Nintendo to put all the updates or upgrades that are free for every game that you want. Now, I know one thing about companies, they never make everything available. So now Nintendo is going to pick and choose which Switch 1 games are going to get upgrades for free, or they're going to choose which upgrades is online service included, and in the future you're going to have to pay for it if you don't have an online subscription. I don't see how in the world you can justify an 8-year-old game that you bought at $70, you have to buy at $80 just because you want to enhance the fidelity and performance when you bought the Switch 2. So you are getting punished, not me because I'm not buying the Switch 2, but you're getting punished because of Nintendo's backwards compatibility issues. Think about that. If Nintendo wasn't lazy and figured out how to get Switch 1 cartridges just to work through hardware on the Switch 2, there may not be any backwards compatibility issues. Think about that. So you are being charged to have these Switch 1 games that are really old that you already have. I'm sure you have Kirby Forgotten Lands. I'm sure you had the Zeldas, right? That's the main thing I don't like about this launch title. Majority of these Switch games are old. And that's why I think they're aiming it towards customers that have never invested or bought the Switch before, which I think is really disrespectful. You should be able to take any Switch 1 cartridge and put it into the Switch 2 and it should just work like it should with better performance for free. So because of the compatibility issues, that's your fault, Nintendo. Don't punish your loyal customers. Every single upgrade should be free. The compatibility issues aren't our fault. It's your fault, Nintendo. And I think it's scummy that you want to make money off of upgrades when you already got money for the Switch 2. We already paid for the old Switch 1 games that had terrible performance. I'm so glad I'm not buying the Switch 2 or the enhanced editions or the game key cards. Nintendo, you have become scammers. You have. Because I know that you left out the price of the system and games on purpose in the Direct. I know it for a fact. Either you took us for fools, either that or it was deceptive, or you just thought, oh, we'll pay anything anyway because it's Nintendo. And Nintendo's right. You will pay anything for Mario Kart World. You will pay anything for Switch 2. And you possibly are destroying the video game industry. Thank you so much for destroying my favorite hobby. A hobby that's just supposed to be fun. A hobby that's not supposed to be luxury where I decide, am I going to buy clothes, gas for the car, food for the house for my family, or am I going to buy an $80 video game? And anyone that can defend $80 is insane. All you're doing is being a corporate shill. And all they want is your money. I mean, everybody knows companies only want your money, right? Once they get your money, they're just going to be just as disrespectful as they are to us, the loyal customer that supported them for 40 plus years. You know what mentality I don't understand? I don't understand how people can be mad about waiting for pre-orders when we waited years for the Switch 2 even to exist. How many times do we say, oh, there's a Switch Pro coming, there's a Switch Pro coming, there's a Switch Pro coming? Yeah, you know the Switch 2 exists. We knew about all the leaks were right and real, and we knew that Nintendo didn't debunk anything. So I think you can wait for your pre-orders to get the Switch 2. I'm done with Mario gaming. I'm not buying the next Xbox PC hybrid. I'm not buying the next Xbox handheld that's not even Xbox, but it's using Windows operating system. So it plays Xbox, but it doesn't play Xbox games. It just plays Windows games that Xbox plays. Seriously, Xbox, you couldn't make an Xbox handheld that is dedicated for Xbox? You know how many years we waited for an Xbox handheld? And you couldn't even make an Xbox handheld? I'm sorry, I gotta lower my voice. I'm sorry, I get mad. I'm human. All I'm saying is, you're making a handheld that isn't even Xbox, but calling it or making it look cosmetically like an Xbox, I guess. I don't know. I really don't care. I got the Steam Deck and I love it. And I have 2 gaming gaming laptops, right? I hardly play PC at all. I have Steam, I have GOG, right? I have EA. I don't know where the sharpener is. It used to be on the dresser. I mean, the bookshelf. Try and look in the bedroom. Maybe it's in mom's room. Sorry, guys. So, like I was saying, though, I don't want the PS6. I could care less about it. I don't even think I want Grand Theft Auto 6 if it's woke. If it's woke, I'm not buying it at all. I could care less. Which I think is another thing. We wait so many years for the Switch Pro, right? We waited so many years for Grand Theft Auto 6. My question to you is, what if they don't meet your standards? You know, I didn't care about 120 frame. Hold on a second, sorry. Guys, I need you to lower your voice, please. Close the door. Sorry, guys. I don't care about 120 frame rates per second, right? I'd rather 60 if it made it cheaper, right? I don't care about 4K. Whatever you did to get it to do 4K, which isn't even 4K, it would have been cheaper. And then maybe you wouldn't have made a loss. I don't care you made a loss, but I'm just saying some of your Switch 1 games didn't even run 30 frame rates per second. So if you were able to get the Switch 1 games to even run 60 frame rates per second, that's better than 30 to 25. Monster Hunter Stories sometimes would run 30 frame rates per second and drop to 25. And that's the other thing I have to say. These new customers that you're aiming the Switch 2 towards, they didn't have to deal with the underpowered Switch that only had 4 gigs RAM versus, I believe, rumor, the Switch 2 has 12 gigs RAM. Well, guess what? The Steam Deck has 16 gigs RAM. The PS5 has 16 gigs RAM. I'm sorry, I gotta lower my voice. So let me ask you this. What kind of magic did you do on the Switch 2? Yes, I understand it's a new system, so it's modern technology, way more modern than Nintendo ever had, that's for sure. And that might be the problem. Now, because they have such modern technology, they're getting cocky and arrogant and greedy. They're like, oh, well, now we could charge even more to actually have games run like they should have ran before. This isn't coming from a Nintendo fanboy, okay? This is coming from a loyal Nintendo customer that have bought every single system they ever released. Now, I do have to be honest. I mean the main line. The one system I've never gotten that I actually want is a Game Boy Light. Because if you know, we got the Game Boy Color. Well, there's actually a Game Boy Light that has a backlit LCD. It's awesome. Can you imagine if you were a kid and you had the Game Boy Light and you were able to play at nighttime with a Game Boy? That's basically what the Game Boy Light was. It was really cool, but it wasn't imported into North America. I only saw somebody with a Game Boy Light, and I said, "What in the world is that?" And they're like, "Oh, this is the Game Boy Light," and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." I could get it now, but it's like $200. Am I really gonna spend $200 for a Game Boy Light to play Game Boy games? Nah. But anyway, I'm saying I have the Wii U, I have the GameCube, I have the Wii, right? The Game Boy Advance, the Game Boy Advance SP, the DS, the DS Lite, the 3DS, the new 3DS, the 3DS XL, everything. The only one I don't own right now is an NES and Super Nintendo. I'll eventually get that. But my point is, this is coming from someone that has been a customer for years with Nintendo. And I gave you a pass about this and that and the other, but I'm not giving you a pass anymore. Not anymore. I'm not going to complain about prices but still buy it. I'm actually going to stand up for what I believe, and I'm not going to buy it. And the only way, because I made it very clear, I don't want to buy the Switch 2. The only way I get a Switch 2 is either GameStop used so that Nintendo gets no profit, or a pawn shop. I mean it. I'm not giving Nintendo any of my money for the Switch 2 or their games. If I did obtain a Switch 2, which I really don't care because the pre-orders are sold out, it's going to be really hard to get. I don't care. I don't care. I have a 512 gig HDMI GameCube, right? I have a 512 gig Wii that's coming in the mail. I don't need the Switch 2. I have an insane backlog of all the older generation systems that I don't even play. Who knows? Maybe if I just stop buying video games altogether, I'll become rich. Because if my money isn't going to video games, I mean, I'll get clothes. I hardly buy clothes. You know, I mean, what else other than clothes? I don't know. All my life I've been buying video games. um, you know, but I'm done with modern gaming. I'm done with it. I'll just play retro and actually have fun. And isn't that what the hobby is for? The hobby is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be aggravating. It's not supposed to be about greed. It's just about my childhood, reliving my childhood. And Nintendo is taking your nostalgia and keeping it hostage. They're not giving you a way to buy these old games, and they're doing it on purpose so that they could sell you remakes of old games for maybe the same price or higher. No more. No more. So congratulations, Nintendo. You got exactly what you didn't want. You didn't want us to, play our old games and stop buying the new. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm not buying your Switch 2 or the Switch 2 games or the game key cards that are going to be useless after the eShop gets shut down like you did with the Wii, Wii U, and 3DS. Because I got news for you. Ubisoft said it out their own mouth. Digital games, you don't own it. In the terms of service, you're borrowing their software and they could take it away anytime they want. So that applies to Switch 1, eShop. You're borrowing their software and they could take it anytime they want. That applies to the game key cards. They're letting you use their software for the time being. But when the shop closes, they're absolutely useless. And I'm telling you this now. GameStop and all these other companies that are going to accept trade-ins, they shouldn't accept these game key cards. They're getting ripped off. So not only are you scamming your loyal customers, not only are you scamming your new customers, but you're scamming GameStop and all other stores that will accept the trade-ins. Congratulations, Nintendo. Congratulations. You're more greedy than I thought you were. Congratulations.